Great. All right.
I
think we'll get started with our small but hearty band. Thank you for coming to the CMEI colloquium. We have a few more that you should get into your calendars. There's one on March 30th.
No, March 23rd is the next one.
March
There's
23rd.
one on March 30th, and one on April 13th, and one other one we haven't decided quite when yet. So you'll be informed.
Yes, yes. And if you're not on the CMEI mailing list, let us know, and we'll put you on. And we're really excited this time to have Tal Gilead here from Hebrew University. We met now, was it like... Oh, is that when we met? Okay. And then we saw each other in Jerusalem, last year? Yeah. And we had a fantastic conversation that really changed my thinking about a bunch of things, and I still have Tal's syllabus in my folder that sort of helped me think about the course that Jake and I are teaching together, and lots of other things. And so when Tal said that he was coming to Teachers College, where he is a visiting scholar this year, and said, great, come to Boston, and we're really, really pleased to have him here and pleased to have him talk to us. And so he'll give a paper, and then we will jump in with lots of critical and inquiring questions.
Should we do it like I read it and then ask a question, or should...
Totally up to you. What do you prefer?
Do you prefer a small group? I mean,
you're happy to be interrupted?
Yeah.
Okay, so feel free to interrupt.
So, I'll use the papers just because English is not my first language. It's easy this way. Over the last few decades, I think economic growth became one of the most important aims of education, if not the most important one. I think it's really hard to overstate how important economics have become to the field of education. So just a few examples to set us on the way. If you look at policy-making bodies, I chose 3 of them. Main policy-making bodies in the world. So the World Bank, this is what they say on the websites, the educational websites. Okay. So education is fundamental to development and growth. The EU, education and training are crucial for both economic and social progress. And learning skills, labor market needs to play a key role in this. And the OECD, also Organization for Economic Development, both individuals as countries, refugee communications, as individuals, essential identity. Now what is interesting, for example, about the OECD, is that they don't say anything else about education. I mean, this is what there is. Education for them is mainly an economic thing. And if we turn to the national level, I think things are not very different. Following a worldwide wave of educational reform that started with the nation at risk in 1983 in the US, we've seen these neoliberal reform plans everywhere in the world, coming one after the other, and changing and making it really about the economy. Education very much about the economy. This wave of reform is called normally the Global Educational Reform Movement, or in short, GER. So that's what it is. And some other quotes, just to clarify how important this topic is, I think. This is the view of policy researchers, people working within the policy field, not in the level of education. So on the improving national economy, this is the end of the 1990s. Improving national economy, but that in connection with schooling, employment, productivity, and trade has become a key component, if not the key component of current worldwide educational policy. The US, Stefan Ball from England, the Institute of Education. Educational policy has in many ways been subordinated to economic policy. And the last one is Marvinson from Australia. So we're talking about a global phenomenon here, not just one country, one place, but the way policy in general works. Extending to the Mediterranean education and elsewhere, economic works to colonizing or eliminating the non-economic other that was outside and opposite to itself, such as the non-pecuniary individual benefits of education and its shared collective benefits will drop from views. I mean, it's not just about economics, But the way economics works, it changes the view of what we see as education, how we conceive education. Okay? So, at the heart of the current link between education and the economy lies a very simple, I think, but very powerful idea. So this idea was first systematically advanced by Theodore Schwartz. In his inaugural lecture as the president of the American Economic Association in 1960, Schwartz argued that the individual productive capacities, which he termed human capital, are an important determinant of economic growth. He added that since education has a crucial role in developing these capacities, its contribution to increasing productivity and growth must not be overlooked by economists. Okay? In discussing education as an instrument for enhancing both personal and social productivity, Schwartz, who later won the Nobel Prize in Economics for his work, opened the door for a tight linkage between education and economic growth. Since then, this link has not only been thoroughly researched and discussed, but also came to provide the basis of currently dominant perception of education from the economy. The link made here then is simple. Education provides useful skills improve productivity leads to higher wages for individuals, and economic growth of the state. It is important to clarify that the idea that education has a positive effect on both private and social productivity has not remained uncontested. There are many interesting critiques of it, the screening hypothesis, and other things I don't have time to get into it. But there are many, and I'm just going to offer a different kind of critique than the one already are. There are many empirical critiques that say that it doesn't really help economic growth. But the mere recognition that education can contribute to productivity is in itself insufficient to justify making it into a key educational aid. Many educationists, sociologists, philosophers, and others argue that education should not be approached as a tool for increasing production because it has other, more pressing aims, such as developing autonomy, forming good citizens, or enhancing moral behavior. A rationale then has to be provided for placing increasing productivity as such a central educational aim. This mainly hinges on the contribution of growth to bettering human life and increasing happiness. What is argued is that education is good for economic growth, and that economic growth helps to make people happier. After all, even economists tend to agree that economic growth is not important in itself. So here the word of an economist. Economic performance is not intrinsically interesting. People have no innate interest in money supply, inflation, growth, inequality, and it goes on, how many hamburgers were sold, and how many TV sets were sold, and all that. The end is the enrichment of mankind's feeling of well-being. Economic things matter only as far as they make people happier. So even if an economist says, in the end, most economists, when you ask them, why do you need growth, they won't give you a straight answer. They don't like to think about this type of things. But then if you push them, that will normally be the answer. It makes people happier. It makes for a better life. And this is why we need growth. And I assume that most people will agree. Nobody I know wants the economy just for the economy if it makes people miserable, right? Now, the conception that growth is central to happiness rests on a chain of reasoning rather than a specific understanding of how happiness is achieved. And this is what the chain of reasoning is. At the core of this is the idea that the individual should be the ultimate judge of their own good, or what economists sometimes term consumer sovereignty. But our basic assumption is that people know what's best for them. This is what will work. This has both an epistemic and moral grounding. It has an epistemic grounding. We say, well, who knows better than me what's good for me? How can you know what's good for me? So the easiest way to know what's good for someone is just ask him. Okay? It also has a moral ground. Say, or it's not right to tell people what is best for them. We should respect their autonomy, respect who they are. So this is the basic premise that everything is built. That every person knows what is best for her or him. Now, if everyone knows what's best for them, we can go to the second, which is desire satisfaction leads to happiness. If I know what's best for me, and you give me whatever, I'll be happy. Simple logic. Now, and how do we give people what they want? We give them the means to provide with themselves what they want. So if I give you more money, I give you the ability to purchase things, be it material things, but it can also be leisure, it can also be culture, it can be everything. But if I give you more money, then you have a better chance of becoming happy. And this is where growth enters into the picture. Because growth facilitates our satisfaction, either directly by giving people money or by creating better social conditions. Social conditions that enable people to better satisfy what they want. Okay? So this is why economic growth through education is so important. Basically, this is how it's supposed to be. If education helps growth helps people satisfy their desires, help them satisfy their desires, eventually they're happy. Now, there are other justifications for economic growth, obviously this is not, happiness is not the only one, but I think this is the main one. Okay? So that's a basic question I'm going to work with.
Can I ask you a quick question? So, the second, third, and fourth all clearly sort of go in a row. There's a slight leap from the first to the second in that happiness sort of comes out of the blue, right? So there's desire satisfaction. So in part I'm trying to figure out, is there a prior moral claim, which I think is also part of the economic rationale, before the epistemic and moral claim that every person knows what is best for her, which is the utilitarian claim that happiness is
the most important thing.
Is the most important thing.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
In economics
Yeah.
was built together with utility theory. For a long time they were close together, and in certain times now economists try to move away from utilitarian, but they haven't succeeded or to do it really, because they're still connected.
Yeah, because I think you could imagine going from the first claim that every person knows what is best for her to a second claim saying, hence desire satisfaction is the metric by which we should evaluate, is the best way to achieve moral, right, but yes, I would agree. If you have sort of the prior happiness is what we should be trying to maximize, then every person knows what is best for her, desires that, then I agree. Okay.
Can I just flag something which I want to come back to? I am very worried about the definitions of happiness that you're using. I'm not worried about your definition. I'm worried about I don't understand your definitions. I might not agree with them. I also have some problems about the utilitarian assumptions. I can come back to that later on, just sort of flagging it. But I am concerned about the way you're defining happiness, and I just see where you're going with your argument before I come back again with some comments.
Well, it's not the way I define it, it's the way comments.
Yes.
I'm not saying this is my definition.
No, I appreciate that, but I mean, when you put it down to economists, I'm even more worried. If you were, as a philosophy, define happiness, I'm more happy than an economist defining happiness, but that's another point we'll come back to later on.
Well, they don't even have to use the word happiness. They define it as they can use the word utility instead.
That's better.
Yeah, okay.
Because happiness has connotations, particularly in where psychology is going in measuring it, which I find highly dubious. But again, I don't want to derail what you're saying, so just flagging it.
I'm moving exactly.
I'm sure you're probably going to solve all my problems before you go. Carry on,
I'm not
I
sure
won't interrupt
solve
again.
the problem, but
Agree with you.
okay, so this is just a background, and this is what human capital theory is based on. basically. This is what the thinking of the OECD and World Bank and so on is based on this logic. That's it. So now we're moving to the second thing, which is the economics of happiness. So mainstream economic theory is fast evolving. We see many changes in economic theory in recent years. Behavioral economics, relational economics, and it's not. Economics today is not as it was like 40 years ago. One thing, and one of the places where it's movement progress is in a thing called economics of happiness. And this is what I want to focus on. Movement goes very deep into it, but just give you a background. So what is normally viewed as the starting point of the economics of happiness is a mid-70s publication of Richard Easterling, as economic growth improved the human lot, some empirical evidence. In this article, Easterling used subjective evaluation of happiness provided in the survey to challenge the idea that greater wealth improves life. He demonstrated that while within societies, greater wealth leads to increased happiness, the same doesn't hold true on an intersocial level. Easterling data show a far from clear link between the wealth of countries and the reported level of happiness. People in richer countries were not markedly happier than those in poorer ones. Okay, so you found something like that. So you have here the income and here the level of happiness. And you can see that some countries that are far to the right in terms of income and not very high in terms of level of happiness and so on. And I'll give you some newer data soon. Okay, but that's the basic. This is what we found. In addition, we found that despite considerable economic growth that took place in the US between 1946 and 1970s, levels of reported happiness did not significantly change over this period. So this is another study, more recent one, but this is what basically what we found. You ask people, this is a very maybe philosophically poor conception of happiness. It's subjective. How happy are you? 1 to 5. So you find that from 1955 till today, there aren't any big changes. And if you look at the economy, this is like real income, not income after inflation and everything else have been corrected. You see that the economy is much, people are much richer today than they were in the 1950s, but it doesn't make them happy. Therefore, there's a question. Easterling finally raised the question then of why growth and productivity are attributed to such an important place in policy making. If after that growth people are not happy, why is it so important? Although Easterling finally was a weighty challenge to orthodox economic thinking that drew limited interest until the 1990s. But then something changed. Following Easterling, economists started to examine how happiness is affected by income and growth. The results so far have been relatively consistent with Easterling's early findings, although they do offer some important qualifications. More recent research has shown that the vast growth in Western economies has not led to substantial rise in levels of happiness, and that in some countries, including the US, some research shows that it has been declined. Just so these are more recent, like I said, data. More recent research has also found that in contrast to Eastern findings, there's a certain correlation between the wealth of countries and the reported level of happiness within them. So this is what more recent research has found. If you look here, you have the income, the happiness. So you do see kind of line going up, which means richer countries are, in a way, people in richer countries are happier than people in poorer ones. But if you isolate this cloud there, then it's lost. The correlation is lost between the two. The reason is that there is a threshold to that. As long as economics helps to give people satisfy the basic needs, have a stable state, then you can see the direct connection. But once you pass like $25,000, or it changes all the time, obviously. Once you pass this, you lose the connection. The US is very high income, but not very high happiness. So finally, additional research has supported the Eastern finding that within a given society, greater wealth does contribute to happiness. So people that are richer within a society, they do report on themselves as happier than people who are poor within the same society. The question that posed by Easterling regarding the link in the orthodox economic thinking between growth, wealth, and happiness has only been reinforced by future research. Everything that has been found since 1974, most things, is always contradicting them, right? But most things, most research shows that economics doesn't really help making people happier that much. The economics of happiness, however, does more than just describe how wealth, growth, and other economic factors influence happiness. It also tries to explain its findings. A number of theories have been developed to explain what has come to be known as the Easterling paradox, namely the concept that wealth increases happiness within societies, but contributes much less across societies to happiness across society. Easterling himself suggested that this is due to the fact that people are more concerned with their relative wealth than with their absolute wealth. When you look at other people and how much they have, this is your point of reference. Becomes more. What influences happiness is not how much money one has, but how much money one has when compared to immediate social groups. If this is true, then greater wealth will not make us happier, because what matters is how we compare to others. Okay, so that's an explanation. Now, it explains when people within society are happier than others. Another popular explanation is the hedonic treadmill. According to this theory, happiness depends on the gap between aspirations and achievements, and not only on social comparison. The problem is that due to the human tendency to adaptation, our aspiration rise together with our income, and the positive effect of greater wealth and happiness quickly fades. We earn more, we want more, we expect more. A third explanation is save point theory. According to this theory, levels of happiness are determined biologically, and we always go back to our basic level. There are some studies showing that people who had really bad things in life or really good things in life, winning the lottery, they came back to the same level. So lots of research actually saying that happiness is genetic, that you can't really, but I'm not convinced. Well, if you ask me if I want to win the lottery, probably the answer is yes. So I won't be any happier. But if any of these theories has a grain of truth in there, it will have far-reaching implications for policy. Many people say, it's not my idea. I want to think about education policy. I want to think about education policy. So what do we do with it in terms of education? So one possible direction is that we should focus on happiness instead of focusing on growth. We should study what actually makes people happy and design public policy accordingly. Applying a similar line of reasoning to education, Big Hall, a book on education, argue that education should be guided, although not exclusively, by empirical findings on what makes people happy. And by the way, the OECD and other organizations, this is exactly what they're doing. They're trying to understand what makes people happy and then develop policies that focus no longer on economic growth, but focus on making people happier. The OECD last initiative is called Better Policies for Better Lives, and it's not focused on economics, it's focused on other things. Pollution, environment, whatever, they found empirically that makes people's life more satisfying. So although in light of current findings, the idea that the role of education in the economy should be aligned with what enhances happiness rather than meet the demands of economic growth. And although this idea seems very attractive, to follow happiness and not growth, it gives rise to difficulties and objections of various sorts. So one problem is measuring. Measuring happiness is not an easy task, and there are many methodological complications that raise doubt regarding both the validity and reliability of happiness measures. But these methodological issues are clearly important. I will not get into them here. I'm not a methodologist, I don't know how. There's a very good book by the OECD from 4 years ago on how to measure happiness, 300 pages, the best measure. And actually, it's not a bad measure of happiness, I have to say. Even from a philosophical point of view. They're quite good in this. And I don't really like how this organization always does.
Yeah.
When it comes to happiness, they're doing some good things.
Sorry, just what was the title of the? Was it a book or was it a policy?
It's a policy. I can send it.
Okay, sure.
I have it in mind.
Okay, sure.
So can I be particularly good about definitions? Do they use the term happiness? Because what this sounds to me like is paralleling very much the work on both well-being, subjective well-being, and what Nussbaum is saying called capabilities. And I'm wondering if they actually use the word happiness, or you talk about subjective well-being, which is not quite the same thing.
Well, it's not capability. Capability is different.
It's not capability. Okay, we will rule that out. But is it well-being?
It's sometimes called subjective well-being, sometimes it's called happiness. The main thing is that it's based on people's subjective report about how happy.
Yeah.
So you call it happiness, you can also, there's a lot of literature, even in philosophy, about happiness and subjective well-being, and I don't think there's a big difference. Some people use happiness for subjective well-being, there's not a clear definition of the two. So I kind of use them interchangeably. I don't talk about it much here, but in the article that is based on this, I say I show it.
Up to read
happiness.
it. Up to read it.
So measuring is not an task, but I'm not going to go into it. What I'm interested in is then more the philosophical questions, the normative questions, stemming from the use of the economics of happiness as a guide to determining the role of education in the economy. So one key criticism coming from economists is that the economics of happiness tend to be paternalistic, over-intrusive, and sometimes contain some internal contradiction. I'll explain why. On the one hand, it is argued happiness economics embraces an extremely anti-paternalistic stance by placing people's happiness or subjective feeling as the ultimate criterion. Right? We're interested to know whether they're happy. On the other hand, however, when translated into policy recommendation, happiness economics naturally imposes an external conception of happiness on individuals. For example, since research shows that beyond a certain level, consumption has a marginal effect on happiness economy suggests that we should enact policies that discourage such consumption for the individual's own good. That's what we found on other people who implement what research told them, so other people we can implement on another set of people. So there's something paternalistic there. This is paternalistic, so it entails that individuals will be directed for their own good toward a certain conception of happiness derived from the way others conceive it. Moreover, happiness economics is seen as intrusive because the policy based on it deals with private preferences and often attempts to direct and even manipulate them. That's the objective. Now, from an educational perspective, the charge that the economics of happiness leads to paternalistic or intrusive policies doesn't seem so severe, to me at least, for two reasons. Firstly, in many ways, paternalism is built into education. Education is commonly involves the shaping of people's preferences and guiding them towards what is good for them in society. That's what education does. Secondly, using especially compulsory education to increase productivity can be equally intrusive because it forces individuals to acquire specific knowledge and skills regardless of whether they desire to do so. Consequently, the charge of paternalism doesn't seem like a sufficient cause to reject educational policies stemming from the economics of happiness. Another significant criticism of the economics of happiness is that it provides an insufficient informational basis for guiding policy. It is argued, and here we're going back to what is the conception of happiness that we are based on. It is argued that it is too narrow because by focusing on how people feel, it neglects other important dimensions of human life and personal well-being, such as moral values and social relations. It is also important that since people's conception of happiness can be ill-informed, irrational, and distorted, it comprises a poor basis for policy making. So, for example, one can live an impoverished life of sickness, hunger, and persecution under a totalitarian regime and still consider oneself happy because one does not know a better life is possible. The problem here is that conception of happiness, like preferences, can be shaped, manipulated, and trained to adapt to existing situations. When we face policy. When an educational perspective is embraced here, this criticism can become more acute. Educationalists have longer argued that education has aims that are higher than making us happy, and that it should develop other important aspects of people's life, such as their moral conceptions, social skills, and critical thinking, even if these might conflict with their happiness. Moreover, since education, as commonly perceived, is essentially a process that aims to direct students towards certain goods, education is primarily viewed as having to develop, shape, and improve people's conception of happiness. It therefore has no prima facie reason to accept people's conception of happiness as given and catered to. Even when striving to achieve happiness, education is argued should be based on normative conceptions rather than rely on data about what makes people happy. Here also, like in previous cases, it is possible to defend the use of the findings of the economics of happiness against the arguments just made. With increasing evidence that people's reported happiness coincides to a very high degree with objective measures of how well they are doing. It has been found, for instance, that happiness levels are correlated with health, employment, personal freedoms, personal relationships, and so on. So we do find correlations, people know that. Moreover, research on the determinant of self-reported happiness showed that they correspond closely to elements in numerous religious and philosophical accounts of flourishing. This suggests that in practice, the fact that people's conception of happiness are adaptive and open to manipulation is not as problematic as it seems. Relying on subjective concept of well-being to guide education remains, however, at best highly controversial. I don't think this defense is good enough. It's possible to an additional criticism of placing an emphasis in education on creating the material conditions of happiness is that it might hamper growth. It has been found that growth has a relatively minor influence on happiness. If education aspires to enhance happiness, then growth will no longer be priority. Growth, however, has many benefits that may have virtually no impact on happiness, but which are nevertheless important, such as strengthening the international standing of the states or enabling us to launch probes that explore the solar system. This has to do with economic growth and not necessarily with happiness. Moreover, under current economic arrangements, growth is crucial for sustaining a well-functioning economy and a low level of unemployment. Growth, therefore, can still be seen as central policy and educational objective, even if its immediate contribution to happiness is limited. The various criticisms discussed above highlight the difficulties inherent in relying on the economics of happiness to determine education role in the economy. What I would like to do next is offer a conception of education role in the economy that attempts to build both on the insights of the economics of happiness and on the criticism of other aspects. Here I'll be very happy to get feedback, so I'm trying to develop my idea of how it should be. So the suggestion that the role of education in the economy should be adjusted according to the findings of the economics of happiness is based on accepting as given the current state of affairs, including the present link between happiness, economics, and wealth. We take its point of departure, the present findings, and what makes people happy, and infers from them how happiness can best be promoted. Like standard economic theory, then, disregards questioning related to how wealth is transformed into happiness. And economists don't ask how we transform wealth into happiness. They assume we know how to do it. We should, however, at least consider the possibility that growth lays the material foundation for greater happiness, but that for some reason we fail to take advantage of it. If this is indeed the case, then instead of demoting growth, better ways should be devised for capitalizing on the opportunities for increasing happiness that it opens. So maybe growth is good, but we just don't know how to use it. In order to explain how this can be done, I want to re-examine the logic that underlies the link made in standard economic theory between happiness and growth. So, go back to this one. So as previously noted, the basic assumption of standard economic theory is that each individual knows best how to promote her own happiness. It has been established by psychological and economic research, however, that people systematically err in judging how their happiness can be promoted. It has been shown, for example, that because people underestimate the effect of adaptation, have a distorted memory of past experiences, and follow intuition, the consumption choices are suboptimal in terms of increasing happiness. The best indication of it is that people regret the choices they have made. They're not supposed to, right? If they know what's best for them, they're not supposed to regret the choices they take. This begins to explain why people fail to capitalize on the options open to them by getting wealth. Education, as follows, can make an important contribution here to promoting happiness by increasing people's abilities to process and obtain information about how best to use their resources in order to meet their preferences. It can also help them to correct biases that negatively influence the decision in these domains. This brings to the fore the significance of consumer and financial education. The idea that education has a role in informing consumers is well established. Consumer education has been traditionally oriented toward meeting this end. Recent global surveys, however, have shown that although there is a growing interest among policymakers in consumer and financial education, in most countries, this subject receives limited attention in schools. Again, OECD report about the state of education as well. The potential contribution of this educational subject to turning wealth into happiness in a more efficient way emphasizes how beneficial, important, and urgent it is to make them into an integral part of every child's education. But there are various reasons why the education should do more than improve people's ability to meet their existing preferences. To begin with, while standard economic theory assumes that people are always happier when their existing preferences are met, many, including economists, challenge this view. For example, Galbraith, distinguished economist, famously claims that many of our preferences are only seemingly our own, and that they are in fact contrived by producers with the aim of serving their own interests. Meeting this type of preferences and influence is unlikely to contribute to our happiness. If indeed meeting existing preferences and happiness do not always go hand in hand, then to increase happiness, people should also acquire the capacity to judge what preferences are suitable for them. In this case, one should not simply assume that people always know what is best for them, but rather understand it as an ability that needs to be developed. What is required here is a strong sense of autonomy that entails the ability to screen preferences. Here too, education can play a significant role. It is essential that ways will be found to specifically develop capacities for autonomous thinking within the economic sphere, and that the obstacle to it will be removed from education. The consumption in school, and there's a lot of talk about autonomy in the political context. Education for autonomy, and others, but normally people don't go into the economics. The economic is something that, okay, we'll let people decide what they consume. We don't want to go into the private life, but I think it's very important that we want to find it. But even this, I think, is not enough. One consequence of accepting preferences as given is that it naturally leads to an underestimation of the possible contribution of what economics term experience goods to increasing happiness. Experience goods are goods whose true value can be appreciated only after they have been consumed, or after a taste for them has been acquired through a process of consumption. Art is an example of such a good, because to learn to fully appreciate it, or appreciate its true value, demands a process of substantial exposure to it. And some things we don't naturally learn until we are exposed to them. You cannot really enjoy literature if you can't start with high literature. You don't enjoy it unless you're exposed to it. When preferences are accepted as given, therefore there's an inbuilt bias against experienced goods that have a positive potential impact on our happiness, because people naturally favor goods that have a more immediate and evident effect on it, such as light entertainment or those involving physical pleasures, which is argued by Skitovsky, which is someone I use a lot, who's an American economist, of the Central Bank of Economics. In a society in which our most basic needs have already been met, experienced goods can play an important role in increasing happiness by opening new routes to turn wealth into pleasure. Skitovsky also claims that because experienced goods of the cultural kind, such as art, music, and literature, tend to demand fewer natural resources, to be more environmentally friendly, to be more readily shared, affluent societies should place a greater emphasis on creating the conditions that enable and encourage the production and consumption. So education can, of course, traditionally play a central role in teaching to appreciate the real value of cultural experience goods. But this function has been generally seen as irrelevant to the economic aims of education, or even as opposed to them. In practice, since the 1980s, subjects perceived as directly contributing to economic productivity, such as science and mathematics, have been prioritized, while many of those focusing on cultural goods, such as music, literature, and art, have been marginalized for not making such a contribution. Research into the link between economics and happiness sheds, however, new light on the potential economic contribution of experienced cultural goods and the role that education can play in developing their appreciation. Once it is realized that teaching to enjoy experienced cultural goods may help to transform wealth into happiness more efficiently, a new economic justification is provided for reopening the curriculum and reinvesting in subjects such as music and art. This is a contentious claim saying that we should teach art for its consumer value. Normally people don't like it, but I think it will be persuasive for policymakers. Teaching to enjoy experienced cultural goods involves an active process of shaping preferences, and therefore demands that we transcend the current understanding of education role in the economy, which neglects this option. And finally, there's the problem that many uses of economic resources appear much more attractive to the individuals than they are to society as a whole, and vice versa. For example, from the point of view of the individual, it makes perfect sense to spend an extra 2 hours in office in order to get a promotion, even if you're not paid for it. But if everyone does the same, then everyone will merely work 2 additional hours without improving their chances of getting promoted at all. There's a difference, the prisoner dilemma, between what's good for the individual and what's good for the public. Respectively, the individual has an incentive to invest the minimum possible in public goods, mainly goods that can be used by many, such as roads, parks. But if everyone invests the minimum, then the collective benefits might be significantly less than if everyone invested a little more. Here too it follows that one key way of creating economic conditions for maximizing happiness is by shaping preferences in a way that reduces waste and underinvestment. So education can also contribute in various ways here. It can, for example, help in developing a sense of commitment to collective projects, such as protecting the environment, or the numerous ways in which education can help to overcome the discrepancy between individual and public economic interests cannot be discussed yet, the importance of doing so for creating the condition of increased happiness is evident. In sum, the logic on which the current link between economics and education rests is invalidated by the problems of lack of information, the possibility of false preferences, the inability to rightly assess the value of experienced goods, and the tension between the economic interests of individuals and that of the public. Therefore, in contrast to what standard economic theory assumes, providing people with economic resources does not spontaneously increase happiness. The assumptions of standard economic theory are replaced by those emerging from alternative lines of research. It becomes clear that education can play a central role in creating the economic conditions that enable a more efficient conversion of wealth into happiness. If we seek to increase happiness, one way to start is by redefining the role of education in the economy, such that it supports not only the production of resources, but also their effective use. Incorporating this line of thought into education demands more than a minor adjustment in the way we perceive its role in the economy. It requires that we stop viewing people only as producers and take a broader perspective on their economic choices and behaviors. Now to my conclusion, which focus on how work. I would like to conclude by pointing to some of the educational implications that stem from embracing the strengths outlined here. To begin with, it will require curricular changes. The educational emphasis should not only be placed on subjects that serve to enhance production, but equally on subjects that help people to consume in ways that will increase happiness more efficiently. These subjects range from consumer and financial education, through education for sustainable development, to music, art, and literature. Another educational implication of adopting the position advanced in this paper is that more emphasis should be placed on fostering student experiences. When education is designed to increase production, knowledge becomes the primary objective of learning. But when consumption is also brought into the picture, the experience of students is rendered very significant because it plays a key role in shaping the consumption pattern. For example, the decision of whether to consume music or art seems to be highly dependent on our previous experience of them and not just on the knowledge we have about them. In addition, restructuring the role of education in the economy along the lines suggested here might also demand some organizational changes. As indicated, excessive competition hinders the efficient use of resources. It might therefore be required to make schools into less competitive places and advance activities that spur cooperation rather than competition, such as collective projects. Finally, adopting the view proposed here also suggests that it is vital that schools should try to minimize the influence of bodies and corporations that seek to shape the consumer taste of students according to their own interests. This is true even when these bodies and corporations might help increase learning by, for example, donating computers to school or opening individual. As mentioned, implication discussed about represent only fraction of the educational changes required from adopting the steps presented in this paper. These implications do, however, start to point to the fact that once we go beyond standard economic theory, we should rethink many aspects of education. The finding of the economics of happiness only highlights how important it is that we start reconstructing the relationship between education and economy. We are happy for any comments because this is, I'm trying to write a book.
Yes.
I'm trying to write a book about the role of education in the economy, offer analysis of the basis of the book, just part of it. Any thoughts of where I can take this?
Right. Go ahead. Right. I have to say, it's fascinating. You're doing a great job. You're taking on a huge challenge. And you've got a lot of problems, I think. Yes. But I think it's probably worth doing. I think, again, I would go back to what worries me about the material you're drawing upon, which is the measurement. Okay, so at the bottom line, somebody's measuring something which, whether they quote happiness or well-being. Then you're building an argument around what it is that is being measured, or the actual data which come from the measurement. And that's why I asked the question about well-being. I knew some people who were working in multidisciplinary contexts about defining well-being and the problems they had in actually getting a definition of well-being that actually seemed to capture a wide range of dimensions of well-being. I'm not sure if they succeeded in the end, but it certainly couldn't be measured in a 5-point scale of happiness. Are you happy? But I think that that's a starting point, is to, if you want to look at some of these concepts, I think you probably need to find, given you're a philosopher, you're not going to collect data, but you need to find material which looks at different components, different areas. Now you come down on the idea of this sort of areas of engagement with the artistic world or other parts of the world, which would indeed benefit from the kind of education program you're talking about. But that's one area of life, and undoubtedly people could say that this, they could even measure, or find people could measure, people's enjoyment and satisfaction with, say, the arts. But then there are so many other areas which I think need to be taken on board. I mean, I think you haven't mentioned interpersonal relationships, for example. And I know that, in a sense, how do they relate to economics? Well, it's difficult to make a link between falling in love and the economy. Yet probably, when it comes down, well...
Not difficult for florists.
What?
Not difficult for florists.
Not difficult for florists, all right. But apart from florists, I mean, just for example, though, and I think that, when people are talking about the things that reward them, you have to go somewhere like interpersonal relationships, friendship. When friendship's important, networks of connection are important. In which case you could get to questions like, is your community facilitating the kind of friendship patterns that make you feel contented? And that's a link to economics and things. And you could then say hypothetically that the education program should say, how do we build more effective networks such that people get good friendship patterns? So then it becomes a social and emotional education to allow, and the economy does matter here, because a lot of work on communities suggests that the economic factors can be very important in facilitating or preventing this. So I'm just throwing out these examples to say, well, I think that if you're going to pursue this line, you need to say, perhaps, even hypothetically, that there are areas of life and therefore happiness and well-being which have not been studied, but shouldn't be excluded from your equation, if you like. And I mean, maybe there is work that's being done. There is work that's being done, and certainly on social and interpersonal relationships. And I think that's, I like your idea about the arts, and obviously it's extremely important. But I feel that there's a sense in which if you're not going to include the concept of a wider range of possible areas to which this may apply, you might end up getting a bit too narrow for the power of your argument, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I have to say something, and maybe I didn't make it clear enough. I'm thinking about what's the role of education in the economy. I mean, I realize that, for example, if you think about moral education, I'm not bringing it in. The thing is, what my project is trying to do is to enlarge the way we think of what education does in the economy. Because at the moment, the OECD and other policy-making bodies think about it very narrowly.
Yeah.
I'm not claiming that this should cover the entire field of education.
No.
Just what we think about education in the economy.
But I was arguing that there are some areas, like, for example, building a good community, which are linked to the economy, in quite probably could even look at human capital studies. That could be the kind of thing which would, where there's can be a direct link with the kind of community, both the physical community, or the opportunities of the physical community, and the social skills that go to creating a community, which could be relevant. So I mean, and I'm just saying that I'm worried about the need to at least point out a crucial concept in what you're doing is a definition of happiness that doesn't disappear when you start, analysing it. And I mean, I think it's exciting what you're trying to do. And I'm frustrated because I can't give you the kind of data which could say, look at this, which would help. But I think you're onto a good thing, but I think there is a problem about the definition and the measurement implications. Because it rests on, if it's an economic argument, it rests on measurement, often. And that's where I think that's the sort of feeling of, however, I won't say any more.
I mean, I think I feel that I need to define very well the boundaries of what I'm working on. It's a bit tricky because it tends to enlarge too much, and I want to narrow it down to the economics, and then I'm going to the moral field, and I'm trying to bring it back to the economy. And I'm also have this problem of how to define what exactly where's the sphere I'm working in, and where to go too far.
So can I ask a clarifying question in that regard? So I'm trying to. So you said that this is an attempt just to think about how education can contribute to the economy. And you're basically saying, so we know that, so the initial premise was that education contributes to the economy by promoting growth. And growth matters because it contributes to happiness. But it turns out that growth doesn't contribute to happiness. So now we need to figure out, some other source for some other way in which education can contribute to the economy. And now you've said, well, so there are these other things, these other ways in which education may contribute to people's happiness by helping them sort of recognize cognitive biases and other ways in which they are, subject to they think that they have preferences that they then regret. They end up being able to protect themselves from producers and who want to sort of build in them false preferences, things like that. Also, there's some evidence that happiness is promoted through experiential goods that they won't develop on their own. And these are the things now that we should think of education as ways in which we should think of education as contributing to the economy. Is that a correct summary, more or less? So, but the argument is not directly, these are the ways in which education contributes to the economy. These arguments are, these are the ways in which education can contribute to happiness. And so when you say that you're trying to give an argument about how education can contribute to the economy, it sounds to me as if what you're doing is you're equating the economy with happiness, that you're saying the justification, going back to the original justification of people saying that growth contributes to happiness, and so therefore we should care about the economy because the economy is tied to growth. Right? You're saying, well, actually, if what you care about as economists is happiness, it's nothing about markets, it's nothing about trade, it's nothing about supply and demand around scarce goods. It's actually about happiness satisfaction. That part I'm a little confused by, because although I agree with you that utilitarians are basically that economists are, utilitarian, I don't think that economists are economists solely about happiness? Like, is economic? I guess I should know this because I was talking to Dave Deming about this last year. I was trying to figure this out. So is basically your argument is that because economics is about utility maximization, it's not actually about any of the things that we.
No, it's price theory. There are many other things that don't have to do with it at all.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it in terms of economic growth is good for certain things. It's the final thing that it's for. I think the main thing is for happiness. When you go to growth. So I'm not saying that everything in economics is about utility and everything, but there are many other dimensions that are important. I think when we're talking about policy that looks for growth, I think it's mainly for well-being. The organization is looking for well-being. it's not. I mean, most of the work in economics is not done about this. It's about markets, about inflation. Most of the work about growth is basically, if growth is not good, it doesn't help us have a better world or have a better life than what we hope. This is, and I think that the economic mind is realized more and more. I think that the OECD, the World Bank, and so on. If you look at what came up in the last 5, 10 years, we're talking more and more about subjective well-being, happiness, this and less about pure economic growth and wealth.
So is it right then that, in fact, you could, that there's nothing in, that this argument is not anymore, that it's the same to you to say this is about how education can contribute to the economy, and to say this is how education can contribute to subjective well-being or to happiness? And that essentially, if you were to write a book that was titled Education for Well-Being, that would be the same as this book?
Not exactly.
Okay, why not?
Okay. It has to do, there are many things in life that have to do with happiness and well-being, and that don't have to do directly with the economy. Okay, we can do commitment, personal relationship, and so on, doesn't have to do necessarily with it. The something that I didn't emphasize, but there's a difference between the way economists think about the happiness and the way psychologists and educationists and others. They normally think about, people in psychology, they think about the individual. What would make an individual happy? Economists think about the conditions, the social conditions that would make people happy. I don't know how clear it is, but there's a difference between the two.
I understand the difference, I'm just not sure I buy it. I mean, I that like disciplinarily.
I think plenty of psychologists actually think about the communal elements and the conditions under which happiness or whatever well-being flourish.
Of the individual, or because
No,
if you look at
not all
happiness,
psychologists are individualists, but there are vast areas of particularly social psychology where actually the collective, the community, the conditions for happiness actually are looked at. But I agree, a lot of psychologists do look at it individually.
so what I'm interested in is what are the conditions, the social conditions that can bring more happiness, and not what makes an individual happy.
Yeah, quite.
Which is why I draw the line between like education for well-being, like John White, for example,
Right.
that fights about this and what an individual should know and have, and about looking from a systematic point of view of what are the social conditions that.
So why, I'm sorry to perseverate here, I'm really trying to understand this. So if the argument, but say somebody can say, well, the social conditions that, sort of where should we make investments? We should make investments in an education that helps make people individually happy in these various ways, right? How is that different? I think I'm stuck on what the, how is the John White argument different from your argument ultimately? He, for very different reasons, but he would say, he would obviously embrace many of these same things, except for potentially helping people consume more effectively. But I think, he would certainly agree that one should help kids be less enthralled to, right, a consumerist society. And yes, education for art and education that fosters collaboration and, so, but his might be about the individual. Yours is saying was, so we're going to create the social conditions. Where is the difference?
There isn't a very clear line.
Okay.
No, that there isn't a very clear line. I think that's policy, economic policy. They speak about creating certain conditions of inflation, of unemployment, of things like that, of social security. They're not looking at the individual behind it. They don't look at the psychological mechanism. They look at the somatic problems. I think it's a little bit different from that. Again, have to give the context. Okay, the context is that at the moment when policymaking bodies think about the economy, they think about in terms of production and growth. And this is what I think of. They're not interested in growth. They're interested in production and growth. What I'm trying to do is to say, well, production and growth, not me, because all economics of happiness. Production and growth are not enough. So we need to enlarge the way we think about it. And one of the reasons for this is that the last literature that speaks about the fact that policymakers today are only listening to what comes under the name of economics. Okay, so I'm trying to use the economic language, maybe to advance something that in the end is not very far from what John might suggest. I think that using economic terms, using economic rationale, using economic studies, because they listen more to things that come from economics than if you go from more things. If you ask me, I believe that you should teach art, not because it has a consumer value or whatever, but it might be more persuasive for policymakers to understand that it can increase subjective well-being and somehow serve the economy.
Emma has a want to say something.
Oh no, I just I understand that maybe you're talking like without an inner cause of happiness, but you're talking about environment and policy, social condition which trigger individuals' happiness. Things like that, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, your view is.
But I think there's a difference. There's a difference in the conception of if I want to make happiness, if I start with creating social conditions that will make people happiness, or making each individual happy, and then putting them together. I think it's a different conception of how you promote happiness.
And also the basic things, the materialistic for the happiness. I mean, the basic is for happiness is economic, materialistic thing. The first thing, I think.
Yeah, again, I'm working with the model that they have. It's not necessarily what I think about the conception, the ideal conception of what they.
Yeah, I think that actually I mean, as you were having that exchange, I was starting to think, well, maybe it's because he's starting from this pragmatic argument that the economists have the hold the keys right now, and so we need to engage with them in their sort of playing fields if we are to make these normative changes that the philosophers have talked about in these other sort of using different concepts and ideas, and even using some of these basic economic terms that we as philosophers might avoid, we can actually still get some pretty interesting changes and policy recommendations that you wouldn't get if you're just stuck on productivity and growth. Yeah. Do you think like making the pragmatic argument is enough to get enough space for him to do something like?
Oh, this is the reason I think I'm really describing this as clarifying questions, right? So I worry about a pragmatic argument that that concedes quite so much, right? So, in like the civic education policy work that I've done over the last 15 years, first civic educators were like this campaign with Civic Mission of Schools I was on. It was all about literacy, civic literacy. You do civics, and kids were going to read more, and they're going to express themselves, right? Because it was all about literacy across the curriculum. Then it became STEM, and in order to be civically engaged, you have to understand science and math. In fact, you're going to build scientific understanding as you engage with climate change. Then it was 21st century skills. Oh yes, right, to do civic work, right? We are all about the group work and the communication and right? And I sort of found myself year after year saying, I just don't think we should attach ourselves to the latest bandwagon. Now, the problem was that the bandwagon was like changing every few years, right? You are absolutely right that the economic, the control that the economists have is great enough that probably if you successfully attach yourself to that wagon, you might get pulled along for a much longer ride. But I'm actually setting aside that concern, and I'm trying to understand what makes this actually an an argument that is recognizable to economists themselves.
Okay.
That's the reason I was asking the question about the happiness and like is this the same as an argument, say a book titled Education for Well-Being versus education, sort of education to serve the economy? And I'm trying to figure out if the answer is, well, it's about the social context as opposed to individuals, then I'm wondering, like, why is it then about education, right? If it's about, if you're saying growth doesn't promote utility, rather experiences do and educated consumers do and other things, and you would say, okay, so let's think about maybe funding symphony orchestras and poetry slams. And you're also going to need to give people education to enable them to sort of appreciate those, but education seems like a tool because it's inherently individual, right? Education is one kid at a time in some ways. So I'm either losing the economic argument or I'm losing the educational argument.
I'm trying to think about it like that. Okay, what's the role of education in the economy? If you're interested in the economy, what education should do?
Mm-hmm.
The answer would be now to produce economic growth and make more productive workers. Okay? As a policymaker, I'm interested in the economy now. And if I go and ask, so what, if I'm interested in improving the economy, what I should do? Then the answer would be create more growth and more productive, give them better skills in math and so on. What I'm trying to say is that you should think about it in a larger way. That's it. That if you're interested in what education can do for the economy, it can do more. It's not an argument necessarily about education for well-being. It's about what is the role of education in the economy. What role education should play. And I'm coming and saying that it should not be just about production. It should also be about consumption. It should also be about collective projects. It should also be about public goods. And
But all of those arguments are about what economics itself is about, right?
Yeah, it's all related and it all comes from within the economic discourse of our days.
How about proposing it? Sorry.
Yeah. No, if I come from outside and I say, well, we should look for well-being and all that.
Yeah, no, I'm totally on board with that.
Argument.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out when. I don't know. I'll stop. Helen and Rick.
Let's try and put it back into economic terms. I mean, the concept of well-being, as you imply, to some extent in our conversation, is a sort of idealized, what we'd all like to see as human beings, irrespective of the economy. And I agree that's getting off your particular point. But if you think of economy of well-being in economic terms, I mean, well-being minimizes. You mentioned the importance of minimizing costs. Well, one of the costs of high well-being reduces is the cost of the damage. So the more well-being people experience, the less time they'll spend in hospitals, the less money the economy has to spend on picking up the pieces. And therefore, the economic argument then is it's more efficient to have a society in which people have a high level of subjective well-being because there's less collateral damage. And that is an economic argument. So, and if we fail to provide well-being to people, we're going to be constantly finding ways to prop up the edges. I mean, I don't fully understand, I mean, if anyone does, the debate at the moment about healthcare. But it seems to me that, in a broad sweeping statement, the American model of healthcare is to an extent trying to prevent people having to spend too much money, probably the government, on health issues. And this is this argument then is managing an economic argument for what should be, if you like, a natural right. Now, in countries which have an infrastructure of healthcare, you've kind of taken that out of the way because everyone's been covered. Therefore, the cost of people falling through the net is much less. I don't push this analogy too far, but I'm just saying that if you think of the cost of not having well-being, it's an economic argument.
But you can do that. But I think
that's what you want
the
to do.
economics of happiness are trying to do is to go a step beyond that. It's not going back to in terms of whether it's good for economic growth or not, whether health insurance is good for economic growth, whether it's good for well-being, but it has to do with the economy, but it has to do with the resources we have, it has to do with how we budget things. It has to do with many things, but it's not about, in the end, getting more money.
No, I didn't. I wasn't just,
No, I'm
just
saying.
avoiding. I mean, I was arguing exactly. I thought I was the same lines as you were. That basically, the economic benefits of improved well-being. It isn't in terms of growth, even. It's a larger. In the discourse of economics, saving money and avoiding excessive expenditure of resources. It's a discourse they understand. If I can find a way of saying, look, well-being is a way of promoting a context in which there are fewer costs. This would be an argument that might persuade the economists. But anyway, you're trying to change the discourse completely. You might.
Well, it's not me. It's
Well,
happening. I think
yeah.
that one of the points, the important point of this is that in France, Sarkozy, the president, came to really Nobel laureate in economics without finding new measures. Economic growth is not enough. Give me a report of how we should measure happiness in a better way that is related to the economy. It came out this report, 300 pages, about new measures for economics. I mean, I think he wanted to show that France is much better than people think, right? In the end, but and then David Cameron did the same in England. So it's something that is going on. It's not something that's out of the blue army. Individual scholar working in Hebrew University, trying to change. I mean, there's a changing argument about, and the difference between what you just mentioned, if you have a healthcare, then in the end, it will be good for the economy. Now I think, for the first time, economists are starting to realize, although it might, let's say, end up with a little less money for everyone, it might still be worth it. Because what we care about is not just the economy, is also well-being. I think this is where the change is happening, but I don't see it happening in education. I don't see it in this way.
So you're trying to make a link so that what's happening in other areas, we can translate this into the practice of education.
Yeah, into educational policy.
Okay.
So, as you were speaking, I was trying to figure out how upset economists would be with what you're saying. And I think I'm landing on not a lot. They wouldn't be very upset at all. And what kept on going through my head was, at least in the economic literature, in the empirical economic literature, economists don't much care about the content of education, right? Just like education is a stock, and the more you have, the better it is for the economy, right? And what you do within schools and what you do as far as education is concerned, it doesn't matter as long as you get more of it, right?
Although this is changing. It used to be the way it was thought, and now they're starting to say, well, it's not really like that. It needs to be education in science. It needs to be education in maths. And they're starting, in the past, they didn't break down the different types of education you got. Just say if you have one more year of education, then
your salary will increase X amount. Sure.
Now they're starting to go.
But now also, that's going to the fads now is interesting, right? So there's the STEM fad, and now there's a social emotional growth, and you need grits, and you need sort of non-cognitive skills, but. It's still about acquiring more of these things, right? Not necessarily how you structure the educational system within it, right? And this argument seems to be orthogonal to all that, right? It seems to be sort of separate from what is going on there.
Maybe, yeah. I'm not sure. Since I'm not from here, I'm not sure about what you mean is going on. So,
Well, I think he's saying that. So we maybe move one level down, or one level up, or whatever it is in specificity, right? So like now it's not just education writ large; it's education in an area, right? But we're still not getting to this list of things, right? Which is potentially practices within a school, or like ways in which these various forms might be taught, or the aims in which you might have for teaching even math, science, etc. Right?
Okay. So this tries to go further, I guess. One more step. Does that make sense?
No, that absolutely does make sense. But then it it doesn't seem like anybody would object to any of this, right?
Good. No, I mean, many people will object to it because many people in the end still think about growth, and that's the only data we have, the only thing we can measure. And they will object to it. They will not accept it necessarily. Saying, okay, if I'll show you somehow that art helps well-being, would that make policymakers invest more in art now? I'm not sure that it will. Some of them, hopefully, if I'll be happy that will be the case. But not many people will object to it. And for me, it's a good thing. Step further.
This is where I'm confused. If the economists are changing and saying, forget growth, it's about something else, right? Because what we really care about is utility, and growth isn't getting us there, right? So Sarkozy says, right? So it's not about growth. Tell me what it's about. Give me new measures. And what I hear Emmerich saying is, okay, Sarkozy has these new measures, right? And now you come along and you say, hey, look, I can tell you what's going to help you achieve these new measures. Sarkozy will probably say, great, go talk to the education ministry, right? That's sort of, in ways that's below my pay grade, right? And then it's the education ministry you have to sort of talk to get on board with this stuff rather than that stuff. Or if the economists say, no, it's about growth, then you're saying, no, this is the education that's going to push the economy. They're going to say, no, because you're talking about the wrong stuff. We still care about growth. So is that... And so are you saying, Emmerich, basically, yes, you may say that this promotes the economy and economists might agree with you, but economists actually don't pay attention to... They don't really care about the content of the curriculum, and they're not the ones who are going to be looking at this, or no? Am I
in a policy sense, yes.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's it, right? Like they would say, yes, this is fine. This is also not our domain. Our domain is still about stock, right?
So I'm wondering if we go back to like those statements from the OECD, right? And they read, instead of growth, they read well-being or happiness or your frame. Like, what would the upshot of that be if those policy documents were included what you're talking about? Like, is it just that they're open to this broader frame and that's better, or that they then have a different orientation? They might be willing to do different sort of projects or engage in different sort of partnerships with different groups.
Yeah, I think the education would look different. It would look different, and I don't think the education will look the same. Because what they're pushing now, the way I see it, there's the policy makers, right? And there's economists that believe in growth. There's economists that talk about happiness. Those that believe in growth are much stronger at the moment. And they're still the dominant group, and the economics of happiness is something that is evolving and it's very small. And some organizations take it, and some, or if you take it the OECD, for example, it has two, as far as I know, it has two divisions. It has a research division that has good work and develops towards this type of thinking, which is a broader thinking, and then it has the other one who is responsible for PISA and all the testing, and then they still stuck with their old type of economics, if you want, and they go into like testing and maths and skills and all that. So if you have the policymakers and you need to decide, he's going to listen, my assumption, okay, is that he's not going to listen to the philosopher. So you're going to listen either to the happiness economist or he's going to listen to the growth economist. And I'm trying to say, okay, if you listen to the growth, to the happiness economist, this is what you should do. And you should listen to him and not to the growth economist. Because economics is not mainly about happiness and welfare and subjective well-being. 99% of economics is about growth. I'm trying to but there is a change going on within economics. And there's more and more like standard economic thinkers beginning to change their view, and also policymakers are beginning to change their view, but it's just beginning. And I'm trying to find ways to make them embrace this way of looking at the world and what it entails, instead of being stuck with the old way of thinking about the economy.
So if you were writing a book about it, I think that part, like, to me, laying that part of the case out in some ways helps here immensely, because I think you have a theory of change going, like who actors are making changes in sort of education around the world, and what's influencing their sort of thinking, and that seems important in where this argument is doing its work, to me at least. I think.
Maybe on that positive note, I will say thank you.